Alright, lesson 2, fundamental clutches. Describe the fundamental friction type clutches, given information, construction, operation, friction type clutches. Learning event. Describe the purpose of the construction, type of the clutch, the job of the clutch for the wheel vehicle, the connect with the disconnect engine power from the gear, with the gear shaft of the drive wheels of the internal combustion engine does not develop with much torque with when it's first started. It must be the disconnect with the drive mechanism is hard time to develop the enough speed with the torque to start with the moving of the vehicle. The engine power can then be gradually applied with to provide smoother engagement. This is lesson of the shock of the driving parts after the clutch is fully engaged. The train must transmit engine power with the transmission without slipping. Engine power must also be disconnected with the driving system from the gear of the transmission after shifted from one gear to ratio to another. Your construction, the main part of the clutch or driving the member, the driven members, and the operating member. The driven members, driving members, are tied to the engine crankshaft and turning, and they usually consist of a two cast iron plate with a flat surface machine with a ground and smooth finish of the cast iron is usually because of it contains oil and enough graphite to provide some lubrication for the driving member. Is simply during a clutch engagement. One of these surfaces is usually rear first face of the engine wheel, the other is heavy, flat ring, one side of which for the machine surface part is known with the pressure plate, which is fitted with the seal cover that contains some of the operating members is bolted to the flywheel. We'll discuss operating members contained with the assembly later in this lesson. Driving member is attached in the term of the transmission input clutch shaft, they also call it the main driving pinion. Its disc is splined hub and free to slide with the splines of the shaft, but drive with the shaft through the same splines, and the driving member must be called the clutch plate with the clutch disc. We will call the clutch disc to keep the confusing of the pressure plate. The clutch disc is usually made with a spring steel with the shape of a single flat disc, number of flat segments. Facing attached end of each of the disc of the main of the copper rib of the face must be able to withstand the produce of the friction and when the clutch is slipping. Most commonly used facings are made of cotton asbestos fibers woven and molded together, impregnated with a binding agent. With a very often copper wires are woven and pressed in the material to give them more strength. To make clutch engagement as smooth as possible, they eliminate chartered cervical methods have been used to give little flexibility to driving disc. One type of the disc is to disable the inner outer edge of the facing, making contact driving members. First, and reset of the facing makes the contact gradually as the pressure of the decreases. Disc increases with the disc flattens out, and the other type of the seal segments attached to spline hub and slightly twisted, which cover the facing of the gradual contact of the disc flattens out. Hard driven member of the clutch, usually with a flexible center that absorbs the vibration called with the crankshaft, which would then send through the drive assembly, and lifted with eliminated flexible center, usually made of steel springs placed between the hub and the steel disc. The spring permitted the disc to momentarily turn faster, slower than the hub. At the time, the spring must maybe fully compress the disc, then returns to the original spring with the compress of the spring backward and forward movement that permits the spring allows the clutch to turn and move steady rate than the crankshaft, more steady rate than the crankshaft. This reduces some of the vibration result of the smoother power flow. Operation members of the components required to supply with the release of the pressure which hold the driven with the driving members in contact with each other. They include such things as spring linkage and levers and bearings and so forth depending on the type of the clutch. Type of clutches. There have been several kinds of clutches used in the automotive vehicle, but they are made of the vehicle ranging from the small passenger, large truck, and tractors and tractor vehicles. One-way clutches are classified type of the spring holding the driving and driving members together. View single diaphragm and helical single spring clutches. The clutch diaphragm is used instead of the coil spring. The diaphragm is cone shaped with the spring steel, but the diaphragm is mounted between the cover and the pressure plate. With the diaphragm is near flat. When the clutch is engaged, the action with the type of the spring with the similar of the bottom of an ordinary oil can. Outer rim of the diaphragm is secured with the pressure plate pivoted on the rings. Pressure is applied with the inner section with the cause the outer rim to move away from the flywheel. This draw with the pressure plate away from the clutch disc, releasing and disengaging the clutch. The pressure is relieved from the inner section. The oil can acts in the diaphragm cause the inner section to move out, and the movement of the outer rim of the pressure plates against the clutch disc engage the clutch. Hardened single spring clutch with the pressure plate applied with the pressure of the clutch dip with the adjusting part plate sleeves. Series of the toggle switch with the clutch release with the bearing moved forward and apply with the pressure level. The lower portion of the toggle lever with the adjusting plate sleeve. This move of the toggle lever is always with the pressure plate. With the pressure plate is pulled away with the clutch disc and spring with a single spring with the pressure is exerted with a single large coil spring. An helical spring clutch with a simple system of levers is pivoted on the cover of the force of the pressure plate away from the driven disc and against the pressure springs with the clutch releasing the bearings move forward against the inner ends of the lever. Your automatic clutches are classified by the number of plate and discs used in the construction. Single plate with the clutch has one driven disc between the flywheel and the pressure plate with the flywheel is not considered to be a plate even if it acts in one of the driving surfaces. A double plate clutch is different only if another disc and plate has been added. Multi-disc clutches. Our driving discs have been lugged similar with the gear teeth around the outer edge of the mesh for the internal spline with the clutch case with the bolt of the rotate the flywheel the driven disc are carried in parallel pins which are solidly set with the clutch spider. Construction permits movement of all the discs and the pressure of the plane that provide the clearance for the between them. Clutches engage with the spring move of the pressure plate with the forward holding all the discs all together firmly. These cause the clutch spider to revolve to turn the clutch shaft with the key with the multi-disc clutches. The face usually are attached to the drive disc. This reducing the weight of the driving disc of the consequently tendency to continue with the spinning of the after clutch is released because of the considerable number of the discs involved with the pressure plate, but they have moved farther, separated with the disc and complete with the clutches having fewer driving and driven members. This is therefore less mechanical advantage on the clutch pedal. The greater foot pressure is required to depress it. In wet type clutch, the disc of an entire internal assembly of the runner in an oil bath. The operation of the type of the clutch is similar to the dry type, except for the friction surfaces are made with different materials. Gradual engagement between the driven and driving members are caused by pressing the oil between the disc. The oil's eliminated friction increases. Helical spring, semi-central figural. Many passenger car clutches of central semi-central figural type in which the pressure between the plates are increased with the speed of the clutch increased with the accomplished means of the central figural weights built outer into the release the lever outward pull with the central figural force and transform the pressure on the plate. Construction permits use of the relatively light clutch springs thus facilitating the depression with the clutch pedal and the gear shifting. Our learning event 2, the explaining the operation and maintenance of the clutch. The transmission power of the clutch is accomplished with the bringing more and more of the rotating driven members, the security of the crankshaft with the gradually contacting more and more of the driven members, security unit being driven. These members of the station are rotating different types of speeds and the contacting the stylus to maintain with a strong spring pressure control of the driving driver through the clutch pedal with a suitable linkage. As spring pressure increases the friction, increases therefore the pressure to lie with the comparatively small amount of friction between the members is permitted with a great deal of slippage. As the spring pressure increases, the less of the slippage occurs, but the full spring pressure that is applied. The speed of the driving and the driven members is the same. As slipping can stop, there is an effective with a direct connection between the driving and driven parts. Most of the clutches you will be working with probably have the plate type clutches. Let's see what you take a look at the placement of the operation single plate clutch. When the clutch is fully engaged, the driven disc is clamped between the pressure plate with the engine flywheel by spring. The clutch pedal is pushed down. Linkage with the pedal move with the release yoke or fork on its pivot and the hinge. Puts the pressure and release between bearing sleeve with the collar containing the release bearing and the brace of the release bearing pushes against the clutch release levers. Move them on the pivot pins to the outer end of the release levers. Move the pressure plate with the ring to the rear, compressing the clutch pressure for the plate spring. This allows the driving members to turn off the tree. The driving member of the clutch is disengaged, release bearing on the turn from the flywheel, the driving disc and clutch screw, shaft, the transmission, drive, pinion, stop turning. Or when the clutch pedal is allowed to return to the engaged position, all clutch parts except the release bearing and the collar sleeve of the turn with the flywheel. Introduction to clutch maintenance. Maintenance of the clutch for the unit mechanic include the inspection, adjusting, testing, repairing. The only repair with the unit mechanic will normally be the replacing the worn and damage linkage. Inspection adjusting will probably be the most important. When inspection clutch, mechanics should be examine the clutch linkage with the worn, bent, or broken the damaged part. The mechanic should not check with the clutch pedal with the free travel lever to see when it means what is meant by the term. If the driving vehicle that has a clutch pedal, remember that the pedal is always easy to push down with a little wave with a hard push. The distance of the clutch pedal is easily pushed down and it's called the clutch pedal free with travel. In other words, the free travel, the distance of the clutch pedal must be pushed down before the clutch travel starts to disengage. Your clutch pedal free with the travel is caused with a slack and the linkage is amount with the movement that needed before. Releasing the bearing, starting pushing with the release lever, the clutch pedal with the travel should be checked often and free with the travel that gives the less of the clutch. Where with insufficient free travel, the clutch fully engaged is not fully engaged. It may slip or wear out quickly. Too much free travel will cause the clutch not to completely release. This causes the gears to clash and make it hard to shift gears. Clutch pedal may be a free travel that may be measured first measuring the distance for the clutch pedal to the floor of the cab. Next, push the pedal down until it gets hard and retain it against the measure of the distance for the clutch pedal to the floor. The difference between the two measurements of the clutch pedal free travel. Operational check. After the clutch pedal free travel that has been checked with adjusters required by the vehicle should be road tested, and to see if the clutch pedal is operating during the road test, perform the following. Check for the clutch slippage with the disc can be done by the setting of the parking brake plate for the vehicle with a high gear, trying to move the vehicle by slowly engaging the clutch. The engine should stop with the cut of the clutch. Slipping could not be enough to pedal the free travel of the warm disc driven disc faces facing the defective pressure plate assembly. Check for clutch shatter. This could cause the oil and grease for the check clutch disc facing improper connection. Determine the connection for the improper, inspecting transmission mounting, proper propeller shafts, universal joint engine mountings. Tightening is required. If there's oil or grease on the disc facing the clutch disc, will have to be replaced. Check for noise. The squealing noise of the clutch is released. It goes away when the clutch is engaged and the likely cause of the defect of the release bearing. Alright, that shows your practice exercise and your answer to your practice exercise, and we're moving on to lesson 3, fundamentals of manual transmission power takeoffs. Testing.